When you hear the words government shutdown, what comes to mind? Probably chaos, right? A total failure of the political system. But what if that's not the whole story? What if it's not chaos at all? What if a shutdown is actually a deliberate, principled stand against a system that many people believe has just completely spiraled out of control? Let's dig into that perspective. So picture this. It's October 1st, 2025. The clock strikes midnight, and just like that, the U.S. federal government grinds to a halt. It's shut down. And the immediate consequence? A massive, massive disruption to the federal workforce. We're talking about nearly 900,000 federal employees, furloughed, sent home without a paycheck. That's a huge, very real human cost to a political battle that, let's be honest, had been brewing for months. So the big question is, how did we get here? Well, this impasse wasn't over something small. Not at all. This was a fundamental clash of ideologies about the proper size, the scope, and of course, the cost of government itself. This was way more than just keeping the lights on. This was about the very direction of the country. To really understand one side of that clash, we need to look past the screaming headlines. We've got to understand the core principle that's driving this resistance to more spending. And that principle is fiscal discipline. It's actually a pretty simple idea. Think about your own household budget. You can't just keep spending more money than you bring in without facing some serious consequences down the road. Well, fiscal discipline is just applying that same common sense to the entire country. It's about living within our national means to make sure we have a stable future. This quote really reframes the whole argument. See, from this perspective, cutting spending isn't some painful, miserable exercise in austerity. No, it's an economic growth strategy. The idea here is that when the government spends less, it frees up capital and acts like a massive tax cut for the private sector, letting it produce more. And the urgency for this strategy gets crystal clear when you look at the nation's balance sheet. $36 trillion. That is the mountain of debt looming over the entire U.S. economy. For fiscal conservatives, this isn't just some number on a screen. It's a five-alarm fire. It's a clear and present danger to future prosperity that demands action right now. And that demand for action is exactly what led to the legislative fight that triggered the shutdown. It was a classic standoff between two completely different visions for government funding. So on one side, you had a proposal for a clean funding extension. Basically, keep the government open temporarily so there's time to negotiate a real long-term deal. But on the other side, there was a whole list of demands attached to any funding bill, what some called a $1.5 trillion wish list, with the biggest sticking point being an extension of subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. So let's look at what those subsidies actually cost. This table from the Congressional Research Service really lays it all out. Just look at fiscal year 2025. The projected cost of these subsidies is over $100 billion. Now notice what happens in 2026. The cost drops way down. Why? Because that's when they're set to expire. For Republicans, this isn't just a line item. It's a perfect symbol of totally unsustainable spending. And that's the crucial point here. This fight over ACA subsidies, it wasn't really just about the subsidies. It became a proxy war for the much, much larger battle against what conservatives see as runaway entitlement spending, the very engine they believe is driving that $36 trillion debt. So this all leads to the central question. Is the short-term pain of a government shutdown a price worth paying for the potential long-term gain of fiscal health? As you can imagine, not everyone thinks so. Democrats argue that these cuts have real, immediate, and frankly devastating consequences. The argument is that slashing social safety nets hurts the most vulnerable people, that shutdowns actually cost taxpayers more in the long run, and that they damage the economy by disrupting jobs and supply chains. But there's a powerful counter-argument from the free market perspective. This quote from the Mises Institute gets to the heart of a completely different way of seeing government spending. The idea is that government doesn't actually create wealth, it only transfers it from the productive private sector. So, by this logic, every single dollar the government spends is a dollar that could have been used more efficiently by individuals and businesses. This is what economists often call the crowding out effect. And this chart illustrates that perfectly. When government borrowing goes way, way up, it sucks up a huge amount of capital from the economy. That leaves less available for the private sector to invest, which can seriously slow down economic growth. But okay, what about the immediate economic shock of a shutdown? Is it as bad as people fear? Well, history suggests the market impact is often pretty overblown. In fact, get this. During the longest government shutdown in history, the stock market actually rallied more than 10%. This kind of suggests that investors often just see the political drama in Washington as noise, and they stay focused on the real underlying fundamentals of the economy. Now, if we take this argument a step further, some schools of thought, like Austrian Economics, see this debate as something much more fundamental than just budgets. From their perspective, it's really about one thing: control. Think about that for a second. The power to create and manage money, that is the ultimate lever of state power. It allows the government to fund its activities, to influence the economy, to pick winners and losers in a way that no other power can. And this line of thinking, well, it leads to a pretty radical conclusion. For people who hold this view, the only true path to fiscal sanity is to take the power of money away from the government entirely. This slide outlines that roadmap: repealing the Federal Reserve, allowing private banks to issue their own currency, getting rid of government insurance like the FDIC. It's a bold vision, for sure, and it completely recasts the whole shutdown debate. Because from this standpoint, the shutdown becomes a moment of profound clarity. It's a diagnostic tool. It forces us all to ask, what is all this government actually for? When hundreds of thousands of workers can be deemed non-essential, it serves as a pretty stark reminder of just how vast the federal bureaucracy has become. A bureaucracy that fiscal conservatives argue needs to be dramatically scaled back. Which brings us right back to our central theme. Is all this disruption, this political brinkmanship, and this short-term pain justifiable? And really, the answer depends entirely on your perspective. Is it a reckless act of political sabotage that harms millions of people, or is it a necessary, if painful, act of defiance against a trajectory of debt and spending that threatens to bankrupt the entire nation? That is the question at the very heart of the 2025 government shutdown.